So I'm giving a review here after actually playing Crimson Desert for a bunch of days now. I know that I was going to wait for a couple patches in, but the last patch that came out, actually, I was able to have no problems getting in the game and playing it. Um, I am going to give my disappointment, my negatives first, and the reason why I'm not going to continue with this game, at least for now. The controls. For keyboard and mouse PC players, I think you're better off. For strictly people that use the controller, it's a nightmare. And I'm a controller player. I don't like using the keyboard and mouse. Is it the game's fault for that? Sure, if you want to look at it that way. But I think honestly that this game was made for keyboard and mouse more so than a controller. But that's not saying that like they can't make the game usable on an Xbox controller or whatever controller you have. The nightmare of the controls, especially, is in combat where you have to hold like a tap two buttons or hold and everything. And the system feels like a fighting game, which is unique for sure. Putting kind of a fighting game system in an RPG, but I don't believe that was a smart decision, to be honest. You want to make a fighting game, you make a fighting game. It's fine to have a different control scheme in your game to kind of separate itself from other RPGs and stuff. Fair enough. But I think the combat is a huge problem for me. Um, it's because of the controls. It's not the difficulty of the enemies, because like there are mobs that you can take out, there are mobs that you have to wait to power up to take out. The boss fights are more like puzzle boss fights where you have to have a certain skill or ability or kind of more of a tactical approach to beating the bosses, which is cool. I like that. It's really neat. Um, like the combat would be fine if it was fine tuned a little bit. Okay. Like, for example, getting these abilities to be able to like turn on and off some of these so that way the controller itself can kind of like, instead of holding these two buttons, you could map it to like, I don't know why. So, or have it where like you have sword and board and you have like a list of all the skills, okay, and or you have a list of like monk style skills and you could maybe turn sword and board on and turn monk's fighting style off, or you could jump between them. I don't know, I'm just theorizing, right? Of course that would take a lot to do to grab that for me, so I'm not expecting Pearl Abyss to do that. But the controls, even outside of combat, I seem to be fighting with. Like, I'm used to having games where they have a stamina bar for swimming and for climbing. That's nothing new because Phoenix Rising had that as an example. But I find, like, where I have to, like, hold this to do this and hold this to do that. Why did they make it so convoluted? Um, the prompts for picking stuff up, for farming, as the example, alchemy stuff is very small. It's hard to see, especially if you're in like a field of flowers and everything, and there's stuff you can pick up. The prompt you really have to look out for to farm that resource, because the damn prompt is so small. Sometimes when you're in the town or whatever, to talk to people, you can see it a little better, but sometimes because of the graphical palette, it's hard to see that sometimes. Um, I mean, it could be because I'm old. Maybe I'm not seeing the stupid fonts, but yeah. Um, graphically is like a lot of people say, it's very amazing and everything and whatnot. Uh, the exploratory side of things is good. Like you have to actually go out and explore and find these things and solve these puzzles to get to these points. The skill tree is kind of different in the sense where you have to spend a lot of points to kind of unlock like tier pathways to get to like uh what skill you actually want. It kind of reminds me a lot of some of the games in the past that are like that, which is nothing new for me. Um, a lot of people complaining about the main story so far from what I've done. It's fine. It's not perfect, but it's fine. Um, one negative thing, I mean, this kind of goes in a universal sort of thing where open world can have this issue, Starfield, Skyrim, Oblivion, where there is empty pockets of nothing, where you're it's not so much the Bethesda games that I find this problem, it's more like Assassin's Creed or something like that, open world games like that, where there's pockets of areas that there's nothing. There's maybe a forest or whatever, but there's no encounters of creatures, no encounters of bandits, nothing happens, and you're running your or you're on your horseback for a long while and there's virtually nothing going on to really distract you. In this game it's very apparent that a couple times I went this way, that way for an hour horseback or climbing up. I get like mountains. You climb the mountains, you can't have it all of a sudden an encounter show up because that would be silly. Unless it's a from software game that what looks to kill you. But areas that are like foresty or flowery areas, fields and everything, I'm going that way for a long while and there's nothing. No encounters, nothing. And it's boring. But I think overall, universally, I think that's one of the things of an open world that can happen. And I get it. It's difficult to fill in every single section with stuff. It's very difficult to do that. But it's something I'm pointing out that, in my experience with this game, there are areas that you go to that you can't even access because you don't have an item or you don't have this. And there's quite a bit. So you have to go through the quest. You have to open things up. Uh, just the way the game's designed. Um, I don't really have an issue with that. It is what it is. Um, trying to think of anything else really. Yeah, the boss fights are annoying, but you have to figure them out. Um, I don't hate the encounters like that, like mobs and boss fights. I can't. It's the controls that piss me off, that take me out of the game, even out of combat. That's the biggest issue I have with this game. I don't like the menu system. I can't stand it. I wish they would have a map button and I wish they would have an inventory button. Everything else I don't care, but those two would be very quality of life. Just thought that. I do like how this game doesn't hold your hand. It reminds me a lot of like old RPG fantasy games back on the PC that they didn't tell you where to go or what to do. That's cool. Like I don't mind that. Um, so if you're looking for that kind of game, it's not here. Uh, you can have put down map markers, but you for the most part you have to figure things out on your own. You have to learn, like it's how the game kind of like this system, which I think is very interesting, is you have to learn as you go, and it'll say learning achieved, when you do something, right? And I think that's neat. Um, you build up a reputation by talking to different PCs. Like the PCs is not going to come up to you per se. You have to interact with them and you build a trust, and that's kind of how the factions come into play. And I didn't get too far with that. Um, Crime is a thing, and the bounties can be placed on your head. But here's the thing that I'm bugged by is like other games where you become like a villain or a thief, and parts of the game are affected by your decision to go that way. Not really here. You just like, you'll get arrested or you get killed with people chasing you down if you go into a town and start attacking everybody, maybe. But overall, that doesn't affect, in the grand scheme of things, from what I saw, the world itself. So it's kind of like, the biggest example would be Knights of the Republic, where like you opened up dark side or light side things, right? Um, but it's just something I point out with that. Um, Shops are fine. Like you got to do the grind, like every RPG, to get resources and money, and so on and so on. Um, what else? The Abyss sections are interesting, but again, you have to have abilities to be able to get by these parts. So I think with the skill tree, kind of like, I don't know, you have to map out kind of like what you want. I think like the nature arc, which has a lot of these abilities that you need for puzzles, focus on that as well as your combat, at least for the first bit, I think. You definitely want your stamina, you want to boost that up, you want to boost your health up. Like any game. Uh, I didn't get to the unlockable characters yet, didn't get that far. Because I've been just like mostly like traversing the whole entire land, which is very big, very big. And you will find out fast on the areas that you shouldn't be in. So I like that. That's a typical RPG where there's areas that you get one shotted by things. You can't, like forts and strongholds, even mobs, uh, unless you're very good at doing the buttons or your keyboard. But yeah, that's the biggest complaint I have of the game is the controls suck. For a controller player like myself, it takes me out of the game. Um, and with me fighting the controls, it just does not help. Now, will I go back to playing this a year from now? I don't know. Uh, it really depends on what kind of patches and stuff, updates they come out with for Pearl Abyss. I'm not expecting them to overhaul the entire control scheme, because I think that was the point of the game, where they were turning combat into a fighting game system, which is unique in itself, but it doesn't work for me. It really doesn't. Um, I find that at that point with the controls and me fighting them, the combat's very tedious, and I just want to get it over with. Like every stronghold and fort that I attacked at Purge, it was like, come on, let's go, let's get this over with. Where like combat should be fun, and it probably will be for a lot of keyboard and mouse players. But I can see the frustrations and why this game is split for liking it, not liking it, and in the middle. I can see that now. And for me, unfortunately, I'm going to move on at this point in time from this game, because I want to play the game, but I'm not willing to fight the controllers to do it. And the terrible menu system. And that's my whole impressions after a bunch of days on this game, and that's unfortunate. So there you have it.